In the suffocating midnight hush of Louisiana's sugar fields, a phantom glides unseen, his touch a curse that spawns innocent souls with eyes like shattered ice and hair spun from forbidden gold. These children, born from shadowed violations, cry out not just for mother's milk, but for heavenly vengeance on a land drowning in unholy secrets. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of river mud and the sweet rot of crushed cane, as if the Mississippi itself exhaled the sins of the South. It was 1837, in the shadowed parishes where the bayous whispered ancient curses and the cypress trees stood like silent sentinels over graves yet to be dug. Here, in the heart of sugar country, St. James, St. John the Baptist, Ascension, the plantations sprawled like festering wounds on the land, their grand houses perched on stilts above the flood-prone earth, defying the wrath of nature and God alike. But no defiance could shield them from the divine reckoning that was brewing, a judgment etched not in thunderbolts, but in the fragile features of newborn babes. Picture the scene, moonlight filtering through Spanish moss, casting ethereal veils over the slave quarters. Cabins huddled in rows, their walls of rough-hewn cypress planks warped by endless humidity, roofs leaking the tears of relentless rains. Inside one such hovel on Belmont Plantation, the flickering glow of a single tallow candle danced shadows across the dirt floor. The air was thick, stifling, laden with the scents of sweat-soaked straw bedding, the faint bitterness of chicory root brewing on a makeshift hearth, and the primal musk of labor and despair. Enslaved souls crammed together, 10 to a room, their breaths sinking in exhausted rhythm, punctuated by the distant hoot of an owl, harbinger of ill omens. It was here, in this crucible of human suffering, that Marie labored through the night. Her body, honed by years of back-breaking toil in the fields, convulsed with pains that echoed the biblical curse of Eve, multiplied sorrow and childbearing, a divine penalty for mankind's fall, now twisted into the chains of bondage. Marie, 23, her skin the deep ebony of her African forebears, gripped the edge of her pallet, her calloused fingers digging into the coarse fabric as if anchoring her soul against the storm within. Sweat beaded on her brow like unholy dew, trickling down to mix with silent tears. She bit down on a rag to stifle her cries, knowing that any sound might summon the overseer's wrath, a lash that could turn agony into oblivion. Beside her knelt Josephine, the midwife, her wrinkled hands steady as ancient oaks, though her heart pounded with a fear she hadn't felt since the Haitian fires of her youth. Born in Saint-Domingue before the revolution scorched the earth, Josephine had crossed the sea in chains, her spirit unbroken but scarred by visions of votive spirits and Christian saints intertwined in vengeful dances. She'd delivered countless lives into this hell, britches that twisted like serpents, stillborns pale as ghosts, mothers fading into the ether with whispers of redemption on their lips. But tonight, as the child slipped into the world with a wail that pierced the veil between mortal and divine, Josephine's blood turned to ice. She wiped the infant clean with trembling hands, the cloth absorbing the slick remnants of birth. And there, in the candle's wavering light, the truth revealed itself like a judgment from the book of Revelation, skin as pale as fresh churned cream, hair a halo of blonde silk finer than any master's linens, eyes opening to reveal orbs of piercing blue, eyes that seemed to hold the cold fire of heavenly scrutiny, accusing the world of its iniquities. This was no child of the quarters. This was a specter, a living emblem of sin's harvest, sown in secrecy and reaped in shame. Marie's eyes widened in horror, her chest heaving as she beheld her daughter. Lord Jesus, she whispered, her voice a ragged prayer, invoking the Savior who'd walked on water but seemed distant from these muddy shores. In her mind, flashes of scripture, taught in clandestine gatherings under the stars, swirled like storm clouds. The sins of the fathers shall be visited upon the children, but here, the sin was thrust upon the innocent, a perversion of divine order. Was this God's retribution for the atrocities of slavery, or the devil's mockery of creation? Marie's hands shook as she cradled the babe, feeling the weight of unspoken violation press upon her soul like iron shackles. Thomas, her assigned mate, a towering field hand with muscles forged in the inferno of the sugar mills, burst through the door at dawn's first blush. The grinding season lingered in his bones, his clothes stiff with dried sweat and cane juice, his eyes bloodshot from 20-hour shifts feeding the insatiable maws of the rollers. He froze at the sight, his broad face crumpling from exhaustion to betrayal. "That ain't mine," he growled, his voice low and thunderous, echoing the rumble of distant steamboats on the river. The child stirred, her blue eyes locking onto his dark ones, a silent plea or accusation that hung in the air like incense at a forbidden rite. "It is," Marie pleaded, her words fracturing like brittle cane. "By God, it is. Look deeper, Thomas. See beyond the flesh." But he couldn't. In his heart, seeds of doubt sprouted into thorns of rage, biblical jealousy, like Cain's envy of Abel, threatening to unleash fratricidal fury in this cramped space. Josephine stepped forward, her voice a soothing incantation. "Hush now. This be old blood risin', ancestors whisperin' from the grave. Or maybe, somethin' darker. A shadow that walks at night, deafing the Lord's light." Her words carried the weight of spiritual lore, blending African rhythms with Catholic mysteries, hinting at a perpetrator whose soul was stained with the original sin of pride and lust. Thomas turned away, his shoulders slumping under the invisible yoke, storming into the gray dawn where the fog rolled off the bayou like ghosts fleeing the sun. The news spread swift as a plague wind through the quarters, where whispers passed like forbidden psalms during work details. Across the river on flatboats laden with hogsheads of sugar, into neighboring plantations where kinfolk exchanged glances heavy with omen. By noon, the entire parish buzzed with it, the anomaly twisting into rumor, a curse from the Loa, spirits of the enslaved dead demanding justice, or perhaps divine intervention, like the plagues of Egypt, signaling the end of Pharaoh's rule, in this case, the white overlords who played God with human lives. Vincent Habert, the overseer, felt the ripple first. At 32, he cut a figure of calculated authority, tall, wiry, with a face etched by sun and secrets, his eyes sharp as a hawk's surveying the fields. Unlike the brutish drivers who ruled by whip alone, Habert wielded knowledge as his weapon. Fluent in French, English, and the patois of the quarters, he kept ledgers that mapped not just yields but souls, births, deaths, pairings orchestrated like a demonic symphony to multiply the workforce. His small house, perched between the grand Creole mansion and the squalor of the cabins, served as his confessional, a place where he recorded truths too raw for the master's ears. That evening, as the sun dipped blood-red behind the levees, casting long shadows that seemed to point accusing fingers, Habert summoned Marie to his porch. The air hummed with cicadas, their chorus of frantic prayer against the encroaching night. Marie approached, Claire bundled against her chest, her steps hesitant as if treading holy ground defiled. "Tell me true," Habert demanded, his voice soft but edged with steel, leaning forward in his rocking chair that creaked like old bones. "Who fathered this child? Speak, and perhaps mercy follows." Marie's gaze dropped to the weathered boards, tears carving paths down her cheeks. "No one but Thomas, sir. I swear on the cross." But her body betrayed her, a shudder, a flinch at unseen memories, as if a ghost hand still lingered. Habert pressed, his mind racing through possibilities: a runaway, a traitor, or worse, a white man abusing the power granted by a system that echoed the hubris of Babel, where men built towers of cotton and sugar on the backs of the oppressed, inviting heavenly downfall. He dismissed her, but in his journal, under the lamp's solitary glow, he inscribed the details with a quill that scratched like judgment's nail. March 14, 1837. Birth of Claire to Marie. Features wholly European. Mother denies infidelity. Suspect foul play, perhaps a serpent in our Eden. Up at the main house, Philippe Duchamp paced his study, the room a sanctuary of false opulence, walls lined with leather-bound tomes on agronomy and theology, a fireplace mantled by a crucifix that seemed to weep in the heat. At 48, Duchamp was a man eroded by anxiety, thin as a reed, his face pallid despite the tropical sun, haunted by debts that chained him as surely as iron bound his slaves. His wife, Celeste, hovered nearby, her silk gown whispering like conspiratorial winds, her eyes wide with the fear of scandal that could shatter their fragile status in Creole society. When Habert reported, Duchamp's hands trembled on his pipe, the tobacco smoke curling like incense at a profane altar. "Impossible," he muttered, invoking denial as his shield. "Ancestry, surely. Distant bloodlines surfacing like buried sins." But Habert's steady gaze pierced the facade. "Sir, this child bears no trace of Africa. It's as if judgment has been rendered in flesh." Duchamp recoiled, the words evoking psalms of retribution: "The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God." Was this the beginning? A sign that the Almighty, long silent amid the cries from the fields, was stirring to action? He ordered silence, but secrets in these parishes were as containable as river floods. The interconnected web plantations linked by narrow roads, shared bayous, steamboat whistles echoing like calls to prayer, ensured the anomaly echoed far. On adjacent lands, like the sprawling Oak Ridge estate, owned by the stern Creole patriarch Etienne Moreau, whispers infiltrated the big house dinners, where crystal clinked and conversations turned to the unnatural. Moreau, a devout Catholic with a chapel on his grounds, saw omens. This is Lucifer's work, mocking the Creator's design. His enslaved folk, gathering in hidden clearings under the moon, sang spirituals laced with hope and dread. Swing low, sweet chariot, come and for to carry me home, but now with undertones of waiting for the chariot to bear away the sinners. As months turned, Claire grew, her blonde curls catching the sun like forbidden treasure, her blue eyes reflecting the sky's vast indifference. She toddled in the dust of the quarters, oblivious to the stares, some pitying, some fearful, as if she were a changeling left by dark fairies. Marie watched her with a love tainted by guilt, praying nightly, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." But forgiveness felt distant, the trespass was etched in her child's face, a living testament to violation's legacy. Yet this was but the first thread in a tapestry of terror. Whispers grew into patterns as more births followed across parishes, to different mothers, all bearing the same ethereal stamp. Blue eyes piercing like arrows of truth, blonde hair waving like banners of betrayal. The plantations, engines of brutality, churned on, the grinding season's inferno, where boilers hissed like demons, mills groaned with mechanical hunger, and exhausted bodies fell like sacrifices. Mortality stalked the fields, limbs mangled, burns searing flesh to bone, fevers claiming the weak. Owners tallied losses in ledgers, souls reduced to debits, echoing the cold calculus of Pharaoh's taskmasters before the Exodus. Louisiana itself was a cauldron of contrasts, New Orleans glittering balls, where waltzes masked moral decay, the port's bustle, ships unloading human cargo amid the stench of tar and despair. Creole culture blending French elegance with African rhythms, Spanish fervor with indigenous mysteries. But in the rural parishes, power reigned absolute, law bent to protect the elite, impunity a birthright. The unusual children challenged this, symbols of hidden rot, like the worm in the apple of Eden, foretelling a fall. Habert's journal swelled with entries, a private Bible of anomalies. He investigated discreetly, questioning midwives whose hands had caught these ghostly infants, eavesdropping on river traders whose boats carried more than cargo, rumors of a figure, elusive as mist, moving between plantations under cover of night. Was he a ghost? A demon? Or a man whose soul was forfeit, pursuing lust as Cain pursued murder? Spiritual undertones deepened the dread. Enslaved preachers, in clandestine meetings, drew parallels to biblical bastards, children of forbidden unions, like those of the sons of God and daughters of men in Genesis, birthing giants of chaos. "The Lord sees all," they'd intone, "and his justice tarries not forever." White clergy, from pulpits in ornate churches, preached submission, but privately wondered if this was providence exposing hypocrisy, the same men who quoted scripture to justify bondage now facing their own judgment day. As 1837 waned into 1838, another birth on a neighboring plantation mirrored Claire's, a boy with the same haunting features, born to a woman who swore fidelity. Panic simmered, families fractured, husbands like Thomas withdrawing into silent rage, mothers like Marie bearing the cross of unexplained shame. The children, innocent vessels, carried the weight of collective sin, their cries at night sounding like calls for redemption in a land crying out for it. Duchamp, sleepless in his mansion, turned to prayer, kneeling before the family altar where candles flickered like souls in purgatory. "Deliver us from evil," he murmured, but evil had already taken root. Fertilized by the soil of injustice. Habert, ever vigilant, sensed the gathering storm, a mystery that would unravel threads of power, expose the fragility of control, and invoke a haunting legacy where divine retribution wore the face of a child. The pattern persisted, each birth a nail in the coffin of denial. By 1840, 7 such children dotted the parishes, their fair skins glowing like beacons amid the dark fields, their existence a chilling sermon on guilt and grace. Whispers evolved into investigations, overseers comparing notes at river landings, masters convening in smoke-filled parlors, fearing not just scandal but supernatural reprisal. Was this the hand of God, smiting the wicked as in Sodom? Or the devil's jest, turning the fruits of sin into mirrors of the perpetrators' souls? In the quarters, empathy bloomed amid the dread. Women gathered around Marie, sharing stories of ancestral spirits, offering herbal talismans against evil eyes. Children played warily with Claire, her laughter a rare light in the gloom, yet her difference a reminder of vulnerability. Thomas, tormented, sought solace in work, his axe swings against cane stalks channeling unspoken fury, fury at the system that stripped him of agency, at the unknown violator who mocked his manhood. Habert delved deeper, his role shifting from manager to reluctant detective. He mapped the berths on a hidden chart, dates aligning with moonless nights, locations clustered along the river's bend. Patterns emerged, pointing to intention, a calculated cruelty that echoed the premeditated horrors of the auction block. He confided in no one, but his dreams haunted him, visions of a faceless man, cloaked in shadow, leaving trails of blonde-haired phantoms, each a cry for justice deferred. The emotional toll mounted. Marie's health faded, her spirit eroded by isolation and judgment, her prayers intensifying, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Claire, now toddling, reached for her with tiny hands, oblivious to the storm she embodied. Across the parishes, similar tales unfolded, families torn, suspicions poisoning the air like malaria fog. By 1844, the truth would erupt, destroying lives and legacies, but in these early years, the mystery festered like an untreated wound. It exposed the underbelly of plantation society, the absolute power that bred impunity, the spiritual vacuum where sin flourished unchecked. These children, with their blue eyes and blonde locks, were more than anomalies, they were divine indictments, harbingers of retribution in a world ripe for reckoning. The legacy haunted onward, a spiritually chilling reminder that no sin escapes the eye of the Almighty. In the bayous murmur and the river's flow, one could almost hear the echo, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." And in Louisiana's shadowed history, it came not with fire, but with the quiet wail of impossible infants, born to bear witness. The Mississippi River coiled like a great serpent through the parishes, its waters dark and secretive, carrying the burdens of 1,000 unspoken sins downstream to the Gulf where they might drown in oblivion. But in 1838, oblivion refused to claim them. Instead, the sins surfaced in the cries of newborns, their features a blasphemous mockery of purity amid the squalor of bondage. The air in these quarters thickened with dread, a palpable fog that clung to the skin like the humidity before a storm, foretelling not rain, but a deluge of judgment from on high. Riverside Plantation loomed larger than Belmont, its fields stretching endless under the relentless sun, rows of sugarcane swaying like condemned souls in the breeze. The main house, a sprawling Creole edifice with iron-laced balconies and shuttered windows that hid the opulence within, stood as a temple to worldly power. Etienne Brossard, 55, ruled it with the iron fist of a fallen angel, his face etched with lines of cruelty, eyes narrowed from years of calculating human worth in pounds of sugar. His temper flared like hellfire, lashing out at the slightest perceived defiance, for he believed fear was the mortar holding his empire together. Gideon Frost, his overseer, embodied that fear, 40, broad as an oak, his skin leathered by Virginia winds and Louisiana heat, a whip perpetually coiled at his hip like a serpent ready to strike. The enslaved trembled at his shadow, knowing one wrong glance could summon its bite. In the main house's laundry, steam rose in ghostly plumes from iron kettles, the air heavy with the acrid scent of lye and sweat-soaked linens. Here labored Delphine, 20, her movements precise and invisible, a ghost in her own life. Born in the Natchez district, sold south at 15, she'd been torn from her mother's arms like a lamb from the flock, the ache of that separation a hollow in her chest that echoed psalms of lament, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Her dark skin gleamed with perspiration, her hands raw from scrubbing, but she endured, filling the void with rote motions, hauling water from the cistern, wringing fabrics until her fingers bled, hanging them on lines where the humid air mocked any hope of dryness. Paired with Samuel, 22, a field hand whose muscles rippled like coiled ropes from endless harvests, their union was no romance but a decree from above, orchestrated to breed more hands for the mills. They shared a corner of a crowded cabin, the dirt floor stamped with the footprints of despair, walls echoing with the snores and whispers of other families. Their bond was polite, functional, a shared meal of corn mush, a nod in the dark, but beneath it simmered the quiet resignation of souls yoked together in Babylon's captivity. When Delphine felt the first stirrings of life within, her heart flickered with dual flames, terror at the vulnerability, the risk of her body failing under the strain, and a fragile ember of hope. A child, something of her own, a tiny redemption in this vale of tears, even if the plantation would claim it as property, as surely as Pharaoh claimed the Hebrew sons. She labored on, her belly swelling like the river in flood season, the work growing heavier, her back aching as if bearing the cross itself. No complaints escaped her lips, to voice them was to invite the lash, a reminder of the biblical rod not sparing the child. May 1838 dawn muggy, the sky a bruised purple as thunder rumbled distant warnings. In the dim cabin, lit by a sputtering lantern that cast elongated shadows like accusing fingers, Delphine writhed on her pallet. Ruth, the midwife, 60 and bent like a gnarled cypress, knelt beside her, her hands calloused from decades of ushering life into chains. Ruth had seen it all: labors that stretched eternal, babies born blue and still, mothers fading into the ether with final gasps of prayer. Her voice murmured incantations, blending African rhythms with Catholic pleas. Hail Mary, full of grace, deliver us from this evil. The labor dragged through the night, Delphine's cries muffled by a bald rag, sweat pouring like baptismal waters gone sour. Finally, as dawn's light seeped through cracks in the walls, the boy emerged, his wail slicing the air like a prophet's call. Ruth wiped him clean, her breath catching as the lantern revealed his form, skin translucent as fine porcelain, hair a shock of blonde silk, eyes fluttering open to unveil orbs of crystalline blue, eyes that seemed to hold the judgment of the seraphim, staring back at her with unearthly clarity. Delphine reached out, her arms trembling. What ails him?" she gasped, exhaustion etching her face. Ruth handed over the bundle without a word, her own face ashen, as if she'd witnessed a miracle twisted into malediction. Delphine gazed down, and the world shattered. This was no son of hers, no fruit of Samuel's seed. He bore the mark of another European purity stamped on African soil, a perversion of creation's order, echoing the forbidden unions of Genesis where angels fell for mortal women, birthing abominations. "No," Delphine whispered, tears carving rivers down her cheeks. "This can't be. Lord, why?" Ruth's voice, low and grave, "Child, who's the true sire? Speak it." "Samuel," Delphine insisted, her voice cracking like thunder. "Only him. I vow on my soul." But doubt hung heavy, a shroud over the cabin. Samuel arrived, mud-caked from the fields, his broad frame filling the doorway. His eyes locked on the infant, and betrayal ignited like brimstone. "That ain't mine," he snarled, fists clenching. "You've lain with another." "No, Samuel." "By God, no," she sobbed, clutching the babe as if he were salvation itself. But he saw only deception, his heart hardening like Pharaoh's before the plagues. He stormed out, the door slamming like a tomb ceiling shut, requesting reassignment, fleeing the site as Jonah fled Nineveh. Word spread swift as wildfire through dry cane, frost descended on the quarters, his boots thudding like Dune's approach. He burst in, the whip uncoiling slightly, his face a mask of fury. "Who's the bastard's father?" he bellowed, towering over Delphine's weakened form. "Samuel," she murmured, eyes downcast. "Liar," he roared, leaning close, his breath hot with rage. For an hour he interrogated, threats escalating, lashes promised, sale threatened, but her story held, a fortress of silence built on fear. Brossard, informed in his opulent study where crystal decanters gleamed and portraits of ancestors judged from walls, exploded in wrath. "Control your domain," he thundered at Frost, who defended his vigilance. "No intruder breaches my watch." Yet the child, named Jean, existed, a living enigma, his cries a haunting liturgy in the night. News rippled downriver to Belmont, where Vincent Habbard sat in his modest house, the air thick with pipe smoke and the scratch of quill on paper. His journal, a clandestine scripture, chronicled the anomalies. Hearing of Jean, a chill gripped him, as if the Holy Ghost whispered warnings. This was no fluke, no ancestral echo, but deliberate design, a serpent slithering through Eden, defiling the innocent. He inscribed the details: date, plantation, mother's role. Patterns emerged like revelations. Both Marie and Delphine had toiled near the big houses during conception's window, Marie summoned for cleaning amid staff shortages, Delphine on night duties, preparing chambers after masters retired. Proximity to power, vulnerability in shadows. Habbard's pulse raced, a divine urgency stirring. He inquired discreetly, conversing with river traders whose boats creaked under cargo, their tales laced with gossip, eavesdropping on enslaved kin exchanging whispers across boundaries. He waited, praying for clarity, sensing this was but the overture to a symphony of sorrow. His vigil proved prophetic. Over 2 years, 3 more spectral births scarred the parishes. November 1838, Oakmont Plantation, Isabel, 25, cook's aide in the main house, birthed a girl with golden locks and sapphire eyes. She swore fidelity to Gabriel, but whispers accused her of harlotry, though no proof surfaced. March 1839, St. Clair, Therese, 19, elevated from quarters to serve a lavish dinner party, delivered a boy marked identically. Antoine disavowed him, his rejection a wound echoing biblical disownments. September 1839, Magnolia Grove, Pauline, 22, laundry worker called for house cleaning, bore a daughter whose features screamed violation. Lewis abandoned her, the fracture a microcosm of shattered covenants. Habbert's journal swelled, a testament to unfolding apocalypse. He mapped the sites, dots clustering within 15 miles along the river's sinuous path, a constellation of corruption. Dates aligned with precision, each conception 3 months after something. Digging deeper, a name surfaced like a specter from the mist: Dr. Marcus Lavigne. Lavigne, 42, unmarried, a phantom in fine suits, tall, gaunt, his blonde hair flowing like a prophet's mane, blue eyes piercing as Michael's sword. Born of French Creole blood, schooled in Paris's halls where enlightenment mingled with decadence, he returned in 1825 to heal the affluent. Skilled in fevers that ravaged the humid hell, discreet in delicate matters, abortions. Whispered, vices veiled, he was the planter's confessor, absolving sins with silence. He tended families in velvet parlors, enslaved in fetid cabins when value warranted, a broken artisan, a gravid asset. Habbert recalled encounters, Lavigne's cool demeanor at Belmont, treating Madame Duchamp's fever, his touch clinical yet unsettling, like a soul devoid of warmth. Now, patterns crystallized, Lavigne present at each site during critical windows, a December 1836 soirée at Belmont before Marie's ordeal, February 1838 at Riverside for Brossard's wife, August 1838 at Oakmont for a birth, December 1838 at St. Clair for an injury, June 1839 at Magnolia Grove's feast. Always there, access unchecked, a wolf among lambs. Habbert's hands trembled, rereading entries by candlelight, the flame flickering like faith tested. Suspicion burned, but proof eluded, like faith without works, dead. He sought the women, starting with Marie in the fields, ho rising and falling in rhythmic penance, Claire bound to her back, her blonde tresses a banner in the sun. Marie, he approached softly, the air buzzing with insects like accusatory murmurs. About Claire's true sire. Her face shuddered. Thomas, sir. As records decree. I know falsehoods veil truth. Someone imposed upon you. Power misused. Silence stretched, then, even so, what mends it? I'm chattel. No rights, no voice. Like dust underfoot. She turned away, her host striking earth like nails into wood, a crucifixion reenacted daily. Others echoed her fortress, Delphine in Riverside's laundry, steam veiling tears, Isabel amid Oakmont's kitchens, spices masking bitterness, Therese at St. Clair's tables, silverware clinking like chains, Pauline at Magnolia Grove's lines, fabrics flapping like trap souls. Each denied, walls impenetrable, fear of retribution, sales, worse. Silence their shield, though it corroded from within, a spiritual corrosion like unconfessed sin eating the soul. Despairing, Habbert sought higher authority, Judge Armand Thibault, 60, a pillar in St. James Parish. Thibault's bench dispensed justice within slavery's twisted frame, fair, yet bound by laws echoing Roman tyranny. His courthouse office, stacked with tomes like ancient scrolls, smelled of ink and aged paper. July 1840, humidity oppressive as guilt, Habbert presented his dossier, map starred with sin's loci, timeline a chronicle of conception and birth, Lavigne's shadow threading through. Thibault listened, face darkening like storm clouds over Canaan. Grave charges, he intoned, leaning back, eyes shrewd as Solomon's. Direct proof? Habbert shook his head. Patterns scream intent, Your Honor. Coincidences too aligned for chance. Thibault pondered, fingers steepled in prayer-like pose. Without witness or confession, it's vapor. But, the moral rot demands scrutiny. Divine justice hovers, man's law must align or face wrath. The judge's words hung, a pivot in the narrative of retribution. Habbert left, hope flickering amid dread, the serpent exposed, but not yet slain. The children grew, Claire, now 2, her pale skin blistering under the sun, a fragile angel in hell's forge, Jean toddling in Riverside's dust, his blue eyes reflecting skies denied him. They embodied innocence profaned, harbingers of apocalypse in miniature, blue-eyed prophets foretelling the fall of empires built on blood. Spiritual chills permeated the parishes, enslaved gatherings under stars intoned Negro spirituals laced with vengeance, go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Planters in chandelier-lit salons whispered of curses, their consciences pricked like Saul on Damascus Road. Lavigne continued his rounds, oblivious or defiant, his carriage wheels churning mud like the wheels of fate. Despairing, Habert sought higher authority, Judge Armand Thibault, 60, a pillar in St. James Parish. Thibault's bench dispensed justice within slavery's twisted frame, fair, yet bound by laws echoing Roman tyranny. His courthouse office, stacked with tomes like ancient scrolls, smelled of ink and aged paper. July 1840, humidity oppressive as guilt, Habert presented his dossier, map starred with sin's loci, timeline a chronicle of conception and birth, Lavigne's shadow threading through. Thibault listened, face darkening like storm clouds over Canaan. Grave charges, he intoned, leaning back, eyes shrewd as Solomon's. Direct proof? Habert shook his head. Patterns scream intent, Your Honor. Coincidences too aligned for chance. Thibault pondered, fingers steepled in prayer-like pose. Without witness or confession, it's vapor. But, the moral rot demands scrutiny. Divine justice hovers, man's law must align or face wrath. The judge's words hung, a pivot in the narrative of retribution. Habert left, hope flickering amid dread, the serpent exposed, but not yet slain. The children grew, Claire, now 2, her pale skin blistering under the sun, a fragile angel in hell's forge, Jean toddling in Riverside's dust, his blue eyes reflecting skies denied him. They embodied innocence profaned, harbingers of apocalypse in miniature, blue-eyed prophets foretelling the fall of empires built on blood. Spiritual chills permeated the parishes, enslaved gatherings under stars intoned Negro spirituals laced with vengeance, go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Planters in chandelier-lit salons whispered of curses, their consciences pricked like Saul on Damascus Road. Lavigne continued his rounds, oblivious or defiant, his carriage wheels churning mud like the wheels of fate. Yet patterns persisted, births mounting to 7 by 1840, each a nail in impunity's coffin. Habert's quest deepened, empathy swelling for the mothers, women like Mary, bearing burdens not their own, their silence a martyrdom. Dread built, what if Lavigne's sins invoked heavenly fire, consuming innocent and guilty alike? Curiosity gnawed at souls, who else bore his mark? Reflection stirred in quiet moments, was this God's mirror, forcing the South to confront its soul's deformity? The legacy chilled, these children, ghosts in flesh, symbols of divine equity where human justice failed. In bayou whispers and river sighs, one heard the echo, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And in Louisiana's shadowed annals, the reaping neared, inexorable as the tide. The courthouse in St. James Parish stood as a bastion of earthly justice, its whitewashed walls gleaming under the relentless Louisiana sun, but inside, the air hung stale with the weight of unspoken verdicts. Wooden floors creaked underfoot like the groans of burdened souls, and the scent of old leather-bound tomes mingled with the faint metallic tang of ink, evoking scrolls of judgment from ancient prophets. It was July 1840, and Vincent Habert sat rigid in Judge Armand Thibault's office, the humidity pressing against his skin like an accusatory hand from the beyond. Thibault, 60, with gray hair framing a face etched by years of weighing sins against statutes, paced to the window, his silhouette framed against the bustling street below, wagons rumbling over cobblestones, horses snorting plumes of dust, people hurrying like ants unaware of the divine eye scrutinizing their colony. Thibault's voice cut through the silence, heavy with the gravity of Solomon dividing truth from deception. You grasp the abyss you're peering into, Habert. Dr. Lavigne is woven into the fabric of this community, his bloodline traces back to French merchants and Creole nobility, pillars of our society. To drag his name through the mud without ironclad proof, it would unravel reputations, shatter livelihoods, invite chaos akin to the Tower of Babel's fall. Habert nodded, his throat tight as a noose. I do, Your Honor. But these children, they are flesh and blood indictments. 5 and 2 years, each a mirror of European purity amid the quarter's despair. Blonde tresses like forbidden manna, blue eyes piercing as the gaze of avenging angels. And every mother crossed paths with Lavigne in the shadowed months before conception, summoned to big houses where vulnerability meets power. Thibault turned, his eyes shrewd yet shadowed by doubt, reflecting the biblical wrestle of justice versus mercy. Patterns can be the devil's illusions, mere coincidences strung like beads on a rosary of suspicion. 5 times, across scattered plantations, it's compelling, but whisper thin is faith without works. And if I'm right? Habert pressed, his voice laced with the bitterness of a prophet ignored. If Lavigne's hand sowed these seeds of sin? What commandment has he shattered? Thibault's sigh echoed like wine through a sepulchre. Even granting your vision, What law binds him? The women, they stand silent as lambs before shearers. No testimony breaches their walls of fear. And even if voices rose, the law views them not as souls but chattel echoing Pharaoh's edicts, where the oppressed have no cry that reaches the courts of men. Habert's fists clenched, knuckles whitening like bones unearthed. So we stand idle? Let this serpent coil unchecked, defiling the garden while we avert our eyes? Not idle, Thibault countered, his tone a bridge between resolve and resignation. I'll probe the shadows, discreet inquiries among the planters. But you, Habert, sheath your sword. Cease your hunt. Rumors unchecked breed tempests that drown the innocent with the guilty. Return to Belmont, lips sealed as the tomb. Let this rest in hands guided by Providence. Habert departed, the courthouse doors closing behind him with a thud like judgment's gavel. Relief flickered briefly, a burden shared, but frustration gnawed deeper, a spiritual rot foretelling that earthly powers would bow to prestige, burying truth beneath layers of social silt. The river outside murmured onward, indifferent as the Almighty sometimes seemed, carrying secrets to depths where they festered unseen. Thibault's inquiries unfolded like veiled confessions in dimly lit studies, meetings shrouded in secrecy, leaving no trail for prying eyes. He convened with 3 planters, Philippe Duchamp of Belmont, Etienne Brossard of Riverside, and Etienne Moreau of Oakmont, in chambers scented with cigar smoke and aged bourbon, portraits of stern forebears glaring down like Old Testament patriarchs judging wayward sons. With Duchamp, in Belmont's library where bookshelves loomed like walls of forgotten wisdom, Thibault broached the anomalies gently, unusual births, Philippe children bearing marks not of their lineage. And whispers tie them to Lavigne's visits. Duchamp's thin frame tensed, his anxious eyes darting like a soul-evading confession. Anomalies, yes, echoes of distant blood, perhaps African lines mingled with European ghosts from centuries past. Nothing more, Armand. To suggest otherwise invites scandal, erodes the order God ordained for master and servant. Brossard proved fiercer, his riverside study a fortress of opulence with mahogany desks and crystal decanters reflecting firelight like infernal eyes. You dare question my dominion, he thundered, face flushing crimson as Cain's after the mark. These babes? Freaks of nature, not fruits of foul play. And Lavigne, a healer beyond reproach, tending my kin through fevers that could claim souls. Your insinuations smack of heresy against our way of life. Thibault remained composed, a rock amid the torrent. Merely facts, Etienne, 5 births, timed to Lavigne's presence. A pattern that begs divine scrutiny, lest we invite wrath like Sodom's. Brossard's pallor shifted to ashen, his voice a whipcrack. Coincidence? Spread such poison, and you'll poison wells of trust. My reputation, my yields, tarnished for phantoms? I won't abide it. Moreau echoed the defiance, his Oakmont parlor heavy with incense from a family altar, crucifixes watching like silent witnesses. The system stands firm, judge. To poke holes is to court collapse. These children? Signs, perhaps, but not of mortal sin, maybe God's test of our faith in hierarchy. Within fortnights, Thibault's missive reached Habert, insufficient evidence. The veil remains drawn. Let it lie, lest we stir demons better left slumbering. Habert locked his journal away, the key turning with finality's click, but peace eluded him. Duties resumed overseeing fields where Cain whispered secrets, tallying yields like souls at harvest, but his spirit churned, haunted by visions of blue-eyed innocence as emblems of unredeemed guilt. Yet the divine script unfolded relentlessly. November 1840, Sweetwater Plantation, smaller, indigo-dyed fields shimmering blue as false heavens. Widow Madame Aubert ruled with her son's aid, her main house a modest Creole perch amid bayous where alligators lurked like submerged sins. Cecile, 24, toiled in sugar houses during grind, her body scarred by steam and toil, birthed a boy whose cries heralded anomaly, blonde wisps, blue orbs, pale flesh. Joseph, her mate, turned away as Peter denied Christ, his heart hardened. Lavigne had lingered 3 months prior, treating Aubert's son through fevered nights, guest in shadowed halls. March 1841, Riverside again, Lizette, 21, field hand with hands calloused as martyrs' palms, delivered a girl marked identically. Michel abandoned her, the fracture a chasm of distrust. Lavigne had graced a Yuletide gathering, his presence a specter amid festivities. August 1841, Oakmont, Margot, 23, house servant amid kitchens redolent of spices and servitude, bore a son of ethereal caste. Henri silenced her pleas, his rejection an echo of forsaken covenants. Lavigne's May visit for an injured worker lingered in memory. January 1842, Cypress Point northward, Adele, 20, her youth stolen by chains, birthed a girl whose features screamed violation. Francois fled to distant fields, transfer his exodus. Lavigne's October dinner attendance cast long shadows. September 15, 1842, Lavigne's home, American-style symmetry masking inner asymmetry, humidity pregnant with storm. 15 men assembled in the parlor, chairs semicircled like a tribunal, sideboard laden with decanters glinting like temptations vials. Lavigne hosted impeccably, blonde locks groomed, blue eyes unclouded, suit dark as midnight sins. As thunder grumbled distant omens, Lavigne stood, brandy in hand, voice velvet over steel. Gentlemen, rumors swirl of births anomalous, parentage questioned, my role inferred. Clarity over conjecture, truth over tale. Silent script, thick as grave cloth. I fathered them all, he declared, sip punctuating. Chaos erupted, shouts like Babel's confusion, Brossard purpled in rage, Duchamp pallid as death. Thibault bellowed order, echoes fading to stunned hush. Hear my rationale, Lavigne pressed, composure a mask of Luciferian calm. From his desk, a journal emerged, leather-bound as forbidden tomes, pages dense with notations, diagrams like alchemical runes. 7 years pursuing racial heredity's mysteries, are traits immutable or malleable via selection? Introducing European essence into African vessels, I hypothesized dominance of fair features. These children validate, my lineage prevails, blonde, blue, pale, transcending maternal hue. Horror rippled, faces ashen, jaws locked, the clinical detachment chilling as Job's afflictions catalogued dispassionately. Human souls, not beasts. Thibault quavered, invoking Imago Dei. Lavigne's gaze curious, philosophical, the law deems them property, judge resources for enlightenment, no more violation than breeding stock. Rape. Habard erupted, word venomous as serpent's bite. Against the defenseless, souls eternal despite chains. Lavigne pivoted, unruffled, rape afflicts persons. These are not, law concurs. As a farmer sires calves, I advance knowledge, sans crime, sans sin. The room spun in spiritual vertigo, Lavigne's hubris a tower piercing heavens, inviting bolts of retribution. Outside, rain began, tears from above washing a land steeped in abomination, the doctor's confession a harbinger of unraveling, where divine justice loomed to reclaim the profaned. The children, scattered like scattered seeds, stood as living psalms of lament, their blue eyes reflecting not just light, but the coming storm of heavenly equity. The parlor air thickened with the acrid bite of cigar smoke and the sharp tang of spilled brandy, mingling with the ozone scent of impending rain that hammered against the windows like the fists of avenging angels denied entry. Thunder rolled low over the Louisiana night, a divine growl echoing the turmoil within Lavigne's symmetrical American-style home, where 15 men sat frozen in a semicircle of judgment turned impotence. The doctor's voice, soft yet unyielding as forged steel, hung in the room like incense from a profane altar. Rape afflicts persons. These are not, law concurs. As a farmer sires calves, I advance knowledge, sans crime, sans sin. Silence fractured into murmurs of horror, faces paling under lamplight that cast elongated shadows, twisting features into masks of biblical torment. Etienne Brossard's rage boiled over, veins bulging like rivers in flood. Philippe Duchamp withered, his frail frame shrinking as if under the weight of ancestral guilt portrayed in the stern oils lining his own walls. Judge Armand Thibault gripped his chair arms, knuckles white as bleached bones, his lifelong faith in the law cracking like Solomon's temple veil rent asunder. Lavigne's logic, monstrous in its precision, aligned perfectly with Louisiana's statutes of 1842, a legal edifice built on the sands of dehumanization, where enslaved souls were catalogued beside livestock and ledgers, denied the sanctity of personhood. Property could be damaged, stolen, insured against loss, but not violated in the eyes of the court. No statute acknowledged the ravishment of a woman whose body belonged not to herself but to her owner. To challenge this was to assail the foundation of their world, the divine right of mastery, justified in pulpits with twisted scriptures proclaiming Ham's curse eternal. Duchamp's whisper pierced the tension, fragile as a prayer in Gethsemane. Why? In God's name, why inflict this? Lavigne's blue eyes gleamed with evangelical fervor, his journal clutched like a heretical gospel.
Knowledge. Pure understanding. To demonstrate racial traits malleable, not immutable, manipulated through deliberate union.
He paced, voice rising in rapture. Envision it, gentlemen, populations reshaped, laborers engineered for tropics toil, frailties excised, strengths amplified.
We hold the reins of evolution, crafting humanity's dawn. Muttered accusations, insane. Met his calm rebuke, scientist.
My progeny affirm it, European essence prevails, blonde crowns and azure gazes dominating irrespective of maternal shadow.
Invaluable revelation for empire, for progress.
Thibault rose, frame trembling with righteous fury mingled with revulsion, his voice iron, legal quibbles aside. Doctor, your deeds are an abomination before heaven. You've wrought oceans of suffering on women powerless to resist, shattered fragile bonds, sown discord across estates, ignited a scandal poisoning our soil.
Lavigne's reply, serene as a serpent's hiss, I birthed enlightenment. Your application of it concerns you alone.
My volumes chronicle methods, metrics, verdicts, bequeathed to posterity's scholars. You'll flee this parish, Thibault decreed, eyes blazing.
Abandon your trade, vend your holdings, vanish.
Defy me, and I'll forge charges from ether, render your existence hell.
Lavigne's faint smile chilled deeper than confession, provisions are made, judge.
Data suffices, Texas beckons with vast canvases for expanded inquiry. The frontier yields freedoms constrained here.
Brossard's snarl erupted, begone from Louisiana, or my hand delivers justice.
The gathering dissolved in cacophony threats, recriminations echoing like the chaos post-Babel, but impotence reigned. No statute breached, no tribunal empowered.
Lavigne departed within days, his abode ceded to a New Orleans merchant, practice relinquished, possessions crated westward.
He evaporated into Texas wilds, journals. Cradled like sacred relics, his certitude a dark flame unquenched. The fever of revelation swept the parishes, uncontainable as yellow jack in humid summers. Planters clamped lips in salons aglow with chandeliers, but whispers infiltrated New Orleans' gilded parlors, riverboat taverns reeking of whiskey and regret, epistles ferried across states. The tale metastasized, a physician's calculated profanations, birthing 13 spectral offspring from 1837 to 1844, each a living psalm of unpunished iniquity. Those children endured, aged from mooling infants to 5-year-olds when Lavigne fled, 13 innocents scattered across quarters like seeds from a tainted tree. Claire, now 5 at Belmont, her blonde mane cascading like forbidden sunlight, blue eyes vast as unforgiving skies, skin freckling and blistering under the merciless sun, a Nordic apparition amid ebony kin, her beauty a curse drawing stares of wonder and wariness. Jean at Riverside toddled with identical ethereal stamp, siblings in suffering dotted estates, their cries nocturnal laments blending with bayou frogs. Mothers' boar-crosses varied in weight. Marie clutched Claire fiercely, humming African lullabies fused with Catholic hymns, shielding her from whips and whispers. Yet distance lingered an invisible veil, each gaze into those piercing blues resurrected shadowed nights, helplessness flooding like river overflows, a grief echoing Mary's sword-pierced soul. Delphine withdrew into silence's tomb, tending Jean mechanically, nourishment dispensed, cleanliness enforced, but embraces withheld. His reaching hands met air, cries passed to sisterly arms. Rejection seeped into tender psyches, infants sensing unwant, their existence a wound festering. Recorded fathers, Thomas, Samuel, Gabriel, and brethren, fled in rage or despair, bonds forged in forced pairings severed like Absalom's from David. Transfers granted, they vanished to distant fields, escaping reminders of cuckolded manhood in a system stripping agency from all beneath the lash. The quarters fractured, compassion from some, aiding with sustenance, childcare, murmured prayers invoking ancestors and saints for healing. Others harbored suspicion, tongues wagging of complicity, shunning mothers as Jezebels, perpetuating division like tribes post-Exodus grumbling. As years etched growth, the children's conventional beauty, European ideals imposed, transmuted to commodity. Traders in fancy made circled, purchasing lighter-skinned girls for concubinage in New Orleans' shadowed quadrants, their features premium in markets of flesh. Boys retained for house service, ornamental amid visitors, their pale visages polishing masters' facades. Vincent Habert endured 3 more years overseeing Belmont, each dawn confronting Claire's flourishing reminder, Marie's haunted eyes mirroring unredeemed injustice. Sleep evaded,
conscience nod.
In 1845, resignation tendered, he migrated to New Orleans bustle, clerking in shipping offices where ledgers tallied cargo, not souls.
Journals accompanied, preserved as prophetic scrolls.
Post-war, 1867 emancipations dawn after apocalyptic strife. Habert bequeathed them to a historical society, prefaced with indictment. These chronicle atrocities legally invisible, violation sans name, anguish unrecognized.
A regime equating humans with beasts birthed monstrosities unpunished.
I preserve truth for posterity's reckoning, lest denial recur.
Archived, seldom unearthed, they gathered dust, a mute testimony to systemic evil.
Thibault pursued vengeance doggedly, poring over codes in lamplit chambers, corresponding with jurists, questing loopholes. Invariably, no breach, no standing for victims, no damage cognizable. The epiphany shattered him, the law, his idol, revealed as Moloch devouring the vulnerable. Retirement claimed in 1854, health, death in 1855, intimates whispered the Lavigne specter hastened his grave.
Lavigne thrived in Texas frontiers, practice flourishing amid expansion's chaos. Fragmentary echoes, letters, records, elder recollections hint persistence, more impossible births, silenced women, expanded research.
Death claimed him 1856, natural causes. Executor, appalled by journals' contents, consigned them to flames. Certain knowledge imperils souls, some truths too demonic for inheritance. Yet progeny persisted, 13 in Louisiana, untold in Texas, genes weaving through lineages. Emancipation freed bodies but not legacies. These adults navigated limbo, too fair for full embrace in freedmen's communities, too tainted by heritage for white acceptance.
Some passed, severing roots, vanishing into pale society, spouses and offspring oblivious to enslaved grandmothers. Others rooted in black kin, enduring queries, forging families.
Recessive traits resurfaced sporadically, blonde, blue-eyed scions amid dark lineages, echoes of violation rippling generations.
Even in 2025's light, Louisiana kin occasionally birth such anomalies, fair amid ebony, stories half-remembered, details erased by time or intent.
Ledgers yellowed, Habert's meticulous script, birth notations defy oblivion, 13 in 7 years, one father's calculated cruelty. The profound terror resided not merely in acts, but architecture enabling them, slavery's dehumanization reducing women to vessels, experiments to data, suffering to irrelevance. Law-armored perpetrator, denying victims voice, justice, humanity. Habert's valedictory entry, 1867, quarter-century pondering 1837-1844's abyss. Documented, traced, accused, to death powers. Learned, gravest transgressions often lawful, injustice codified. Lavigne sinned none legally, exploited design treating souls as stock.
True felony, the institution permitting it, denying personhood, recourse. These annals warn, denying humanity breeds horrors. May posterity heed, erect justice shielding weak, affirming all as Imago Dei.
My hope tempers with sight of justification's ease. May divine mercy envelop us.
This saga unveils American history's abyss, power's absolute corruption where law forsakes the forsaken.
Dr. Marcus Lavigne's legacy, unprosecuted blasphemy, indicts not lone madman, but edifice safeguarding him, perpetuating silent screams across centuries.
The blue-eyed heirs endured, silent accusers in flesh, beseeching remembrance lest shadows reclaim. In bayou mists and river murmurs, their plea lingers, recognize the humanity denied, lest histories will grind anew.